It's 11 p.m. You're still answering one more email. Your shoulders are tight, your eyes are dry, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a thought keeps surfacing. People weren't built for this. Surely somewhere in our past there was a version of being human that didn't feel like this. There was. And it is so different from what you're picturing right now that it might genuinely make you angry. For most of human history, the average person worked about 4 to 6 hours a day. Not 8, not 10, not the answer emails on the toilet, check Slack before breakfast version of work you're living through right now. 4 to 6 hours, and then the day was theirs. This isn't a guess. In the 1960s, anthropologist Richard Lee spent months living among the Juhuanzi people of the Kalahari Desert, one of the last surviving hunter-gatherer societies on Earth, studying exactly how they spent their time. What he found upended a century of assumptions. Adults spent roughly 2.5 days a week on subsistence work, gathering food, hunting, preparing meals. The rest of the week was spent resting, socializing, making things, telling stories. Lee's research became one of the most cited studies in anthropology because it suggested something almost unthinkable. Before agriculture, before bosses, before clocks, humans might have had more leisure time than you do right now. Reading this sentence on your phone during a 15-minute lunch break that your manager is quietly tracking. So what did they actually do with the rest of the day? Picture a typical morning, somewhere on the savannah, roughly 50,000 years ago. The sun is up, there's no alarm because there's nothing to be late for. People wake when their bodies decide to wake. Children are already moving, already loud, already underfoot. A few adults head out to track animals or check traps set the day before. Others stay close to camp, working on tools, repairing a shelter, weaving fiber into rope. Nobody is rushing. There's no clock counting down to a meeting. The work that needs doing gets done, and then it's done. This wasn't laziness. It was efficiency forged by brutal necessity. Every hour of unnecessary effort was an hour of unnecessary calorie burn, and calories were not guaranteed. The body that learned to do exactly enough and then stop was the body that survived lean seasons. You inherited that same instinct. It's why binging on rest after a hard week feels so good. It's not weakness. It's 50,000 years of programming finally getting what it's owed. But don't mistake this for paradise. The 4 to 6 hour workday existed inside a world that could kill you in an afternoon. Anthropologist Sarah Hrdy, who has spent decades studying the social structures of early human groups, found something striking about how this time was actually organized. It wasn't unstructured free time the way a Saturday afternoon is unstructured. It was deeply, intensely social. Childcare was shared across the entire group. Food was distributed communally, not hoarded. Status came from generosity, not accumulation. The hours not spent gathering food were spent reinforcing the web of relationships that kept everyone alive when things went wrong. Because things did go wrong, constantly. A twisted ankle on a hunting trip could mean death from infection weeks later. A bad drought could mean the difference between survival and starvation for the entire group. There was no hospital, no insurance, no backup plan beyond the people standing next to you. So the free time you're imagining, the lounging by the fire, storytelling, gossiping, playing with children time, was actually the most important work of all. It was relationship maintenance. It was the insurance policy. Humans who invested in their social bonds during downtime were the humans whose group showed up for them during the next crisis. This is the part that should make you uncomfortable. You have more physical security than almost any human who has ever lived. Refrigerated food, modern medicine, locks on your doors, and yet you likely spend far less time than your ancestors did simply being present with other people, building the kind of bonds that make survival possible. Evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar, famous for identifying the cognitive limit on how many close relationships a human brain can meaningfully maintain, found that this number sits around 150 people, but the inner circle, the people you'd actually call in a crisis, is much smaller, around 5. For most of human history, those 5 people weren't scattered across time zones, reachable only through a screen. They were a 10-second walk away. You saw them every single day. You ate with them. You worked beside them. The relationship didn't need maintaining through a calendar invite because it was maintained constantly by simply existing in the same physical space. That's the trade nobody talks about. You gained efficiency, technology, and physical safety beyond anything your ancestors could have imagined. And you lost the architecture of constant, low-effort, deeply embedded connection that used to come built into every single day. Now think about your actual day. 8, 9, sometimes 10 hours of work, much of it disconnected from any visible outcome, much of it spent solving problems for people you will never meet, for a reward you won't see for weeks. Then you come home and the people who matter most to you are tired, scattered, or scrolling on their own separate screens in the same room. The ancient workday was shorter and the ancient social bonds were thicker. Your modern workday is longer and your social bonds are thinner. Somewhere in that trade, something essential slipped through the cracks. There's a term anthropologists use for what happened next, once agriculture took hold roughly 12,000 years ago. They call it the agricultural intensification of labor. Farming meant more food, which meant more people, which meant more mouths to feed, which meant more work. The 4 to 6 hour day didn't survive the transition. Farming required dawn-to-dusk labor, seasonal surges of brutal intensity, and a population that had grown too large to live on hunted and gathered food alone. Humans got more food security and lost something they'd had since the species began, their time. Industrialization made it worse before it made it better, then made it worse again in a new, quieter way. Factory shifts stretched to 12, 14, 16 hours. Reformers fought for decades to win back the 8-hour day, treating it as a triumph of human dignity, and it was. But here's what almost nobody clocks. The 8-hour workday, the one we now consider the bare minimum, the one that still leaves you exhausted by 6 p.m., is still nearly double what your hunter-gatherer ancestors considered a full day's work. You are not lazy for feeling exhausted by a system that asks for roughly twice the daily labor your body evolved to expect. You are not broken for craving more unstructured time with the people you love. You are responding, completely rationally, to a mismatch between the workload your ancestors' bodies were built around and the workload modern economic life actually demands. So if you're lying awake tonight, still thinking about tomorrow's inbox, here's something worth sitting with. Somewhere on a savanna 50,000 years ago, someone finished their work for the day by early afternoon. They sat by a fire with 5 people who would die for them. They told a story everyone had heard 100 times before, and everyone laughed anyway because the story wasn't really the point. Being together was the point. That person worked less than you, owned less than you, had less safety than you. And in the one resource you're currently running on empty, time spent simply existing alongside people who matter, they may have been the richest humans who ever lived.